In this strange political season, we've seen Mary J. Blige sing to Hillary Clinton and clubgoers dance to an anti-Donald Trump tune. But none of the candidates has yet reached out to a big, diverse voting bloc that's already united by a culture, hip-hop.
Trying to survive, trying to stay alive.
It's disturbing to see that some of the issues West Coast rapper Too Short touched on in that 26-year-old vintage video are still at the forefront today. Poverty, unemployment, crime, and police community tensions. Short turned to podcasting to highlight them and says many people are turned off to the political process.
The thing that's ringing with everybody, everywhere I go, no matter what circle it is, if people keep using that phrase, the lesser of two evils. And it's like, that's not what you want to hear out of your presidential candidates. And I keep hearing that from every level.
The whole damn system is guilty as hell.
In some cities, the diversity of the crowds that came out to protest police shootings of African American men mirrored the broad range of hip-hop fans who cut across several generations and ethnic and racial lines. Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. believes hip-hop can unite people like nothing else.
In this atmosphere, in this climate where there's been racial tensions, especially when we're discussing issues of Black Lives Matter, stop and frisk, when you speak of issues like education, hip-hop needs to put its thumb on this so that we can influence the outcome of this election.
But whether hip-hop can coalesce into a force at the voting booth remains to be seen. And there's a good chance, according to political analysts, that apathy could be a deciding factor, despite the fact that social media comments are on fire.
The only way, Lisa, that change is going to happen is at the ballot box. So we can talk about it, we can rap about it, we can have different debates on social media, but it really, really counts only when you go to the ballot box.
No one's yet expecting to see the candidates have hip-hop on their playlists, but let's find out what our panel has to say. Reggie Osei is the host of the Combat Jack Show. Reggie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Lisa.
Great to have you. Also with us is Tamika Hall-Fry, a.k.a. Lady Blogga. If you log on to Stupid Dope or Mommy Noir, you've seen some of her writings, and she's written for many other publications and websites as well. Tamika, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. Also with us, you've seen him on TV, you've heard him on Street Soldiers before. He is the community advocate for New York City. That's what I say. He's based out of Brooklyn, though. That's his home base. The one and only Tony Herbert. Tony, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Reggie, I want to start with you on this.
Okay.
We've seen so many artists making statements lately in the last year, especially around the issues of police community tensions, police violence, gun violence. Is it having an impact, do you think?
You know, I think the most important thing is that there's a change in the consciousness of our people and of the community. I remember about 5 years ago on social media and on my show, the Combat Jack Show, I would really stick on the issue of white privilege, white racist supremacy, just the differences in terms of like how our people are being treated compared to other people. And there are times where I was attacked by, people of color, like you have this old way of thinking racism no longer exists. But as we start to see that, it still exists, that there is, there's injustice going on, that there's state-sanctioned killings going on, the fact that so many people are talking about it, the fact that people, the change, the shift in consciousness, and that children are being taught at such an early age that Black Lives Matter because there's something wrong. The other day I was walking through Broward Park in Brooklyn, New York, and I saw a father walking his 4-year-old daughter to school, and I heard him whisper to her, if they ask you to stand for the national anthem, please tell him the song wasn't written for you. So for him, to see him in the community teaching his 4-year-old daughter that, there is a change, there's a shift.
There's a definite shift.
And you need a shift in consciousness before you have action.
And I want to talk about it a little bit later in the show, if that shift is just in the Black community or if the shift is also throughout the entire country. Tamika, what about the artists? Because it seems like we've been seeing a lot of performances, a lot of efforts by the artists. Tell us about some of those.
I feel like the artists, so a few years ago, it wasn't such a big deal for artists to make a statement about politics. But I think now there's more of a responsibility for them to step forward and say, listen, you need to be aware of this. You need to be sure that you're paying attention to that. and they're using their platforms to voice those opinions and to basically educate people, because a lot of people are not, they're not going to do it on their own. They're not watching the debate. And
this is a way for them to reach them. But Tony, is that message? You're out on the streets throughout the city. A lot of times after somebody gets shot, something horrible happens in our communities. Is that message? Are these messages reaching the streets?
I can't say that it actually is if we don't have mediums like yours, actively being engaged. One of the problems I have all the way through this whole picture is, yes, there are artists who are speaking out. However, what are the messages that we're putting out there? We have to be very clear what kind of message we put out, because if we're going to say something, then we have to act upon that and do as we say. We can't do something differently in our videos and in our music and promote, all this proliferation of stupidity with regards to sexism and all that other stuff, and then turn around saying fight the power. We just can't have that.
What about the messages that are going out there? And everybody, please feel free to jump in. One of the civil rights leaders in our city, Tamika Mallory.
Okay.
She said that on a previous episode of Street Soldiers at our Push for Peace town hall, she said there's some of these messages are also being kind of twisted a little bit, so people are starting to feel in the black community over victimized and not focusing enough on being empowered. What do you guys think about that?
Well, if I can, Tamika is one of our most prolific, leaders of Up Tomorrow. So she's out here, doing the yeoman's work and what have you. And I think she's right to that degree. But at the same time, it's about messaging. And if we don't get the message put out the right way, it will be perceived, and others will gravitate to it and use it for their fodder.
What about that?
I think aside from the messaging, there has to be consistency to the messaging.
Right.
A lot of times, people come out and say one thing, and then they'll switch it up a little bit
Right.
and say something else. So there has to be a steady consistency in the message that's being put out. It can't change or fluctuate depending upon what the situation
Right.
is or how or where you are. You can't water it down because you're, on a show that's not going to allow you to voice your opinion, and then be strong because you're someplace where you can voice that opinion. If you're going to make a stand, you have to keep it, take it, and go with it all the time. You can't switch it up.
And Reggie, when we talk about formats and we talk about forums and we talk about the messaging, and to see a message of Black Lives Matter on the BET Awards is one thing, but is that really reaching the people that need to understand that or need to see that?
I mean, I think it's a process. I mean, like I said, I remember a couple of years ago when many people were just unconscious with regard to the issue. People are just waking up
Or
right
in
now.
denial.
Yeah, or in denial. Or just
don't
really,
want to deal with it
or
because
really
it's so
just-
overwhelming.
Or really
Yeah.
just
It's so
really
painful.
unaware.
Right.
Just unaware. I think because once again, it's a consciousness issue. And I think shifting the consciousness is a long process. So I think during these past couple of years, people are awake. There is an effect that's working. It's now that it's at this point that we need to start focusing on a concrete plan of attack.
One of the hindrances behind that is the economic component tied to it. Is it financially viable for me to make this kind of noise and jeopardize making some money? So that comes into play as well.
Well, I think you have a lot more artists now too, though. They have a greater degree of control, especially the big ones.
Right.
Greater degree of control over their careers, right?
Yeah, a lot of times, I guess, they can't say certain things because if the label says, no, we have to support this movement, or you can't speak out on this because we're going to lose this endorsement. I mean, even with writing, I have that same issue. Sometimes I have to, or I was asked to water down certain things because whomever is, I can't say the name, but whomever is supporting or endorsing my article
You
won't
need to make
support
it quote unquote mainstream.
Exactly.
So that you're not alienating any of the groups that are in that particular mainstream.
And two, they don't want people to feel like that brand supports my opinion.
Right.
So that's a big
I mean, I think
big
that's
deal.
a standard thing, though, in commercial, like commercial enterprises, businesses,
Right, but
news
then-
definitely, because you have to have so many different people involved or
But then
patronizing
again,
it to make a
it's going to
decision.
affect the message.
But
Right.
what I love is in this day and age of the digital world and do it yourself and independence, you see a lot of independent artists standing up because there's really nothing for them to lose. I mean, they already
Right.
have their built-in fan base, and then even when you look at somebody like a Beyonce, who's at the top of the food chain, and she does the whole formation thing, and it just creates such a ripple. Even artists that are tied to these corporations are taking risks.
That was
with regard to
incredible.
their career.
That was pretty bold and brave of her.
Very much so.
And courageous.
And for something that was so innocuous, look at the ripples that it caused.
Right.
Definitely, it raised a total discussion about it as well. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about politics. Is this greater awareness translating into more action at the polls, more involvement in the political process? We'll see what our guests have to say when we come back.
And I can understand why people want to check out because look at our candidates.
In terms of politics, a lot of people feel, from what I hear, the feedback and what we see in comments and on the streets, turned off by the process. They feel like, especially with the mainstream candidates, you have on the one hand, you have a guy that's body shaming women. That's what his platform seems to be. And then on the other, a woman who's was in charge of national security and didn't understand that emails had to be confidential and secure. So a lot of people just kind of feel like, I'm not really feeling either one of them, and I'm going to check out. How do you guys feel about that?
I think it's great that the conversation is happening on social media. The fact that people feel that they want to check out, the fact that people feel that there is really no choice with regards, but there's a conversation happening publicly, and in these conversations, I see people that are like, no, you have to vote. But these conversations are happening, and I can understand why people want to check out, because look at our candidates.
No, exactly. But to me, the sense that just the energy around the election to me feels very, very different. Because when President Obama, the first time he ran, there was a sense people were like, this is really history. But this is history too. It may not be history we like, but it's still history.
I think the fact that it's historical is being overshadowed by the candidates who are at hand. So yes, on the one hand, it is very, it's a historical moment. There's a woman who's on the verge of possibly becoming the president, but that's being overshadowed by her actions, by her her opponent's actions, and I think, we can't check out of this election. We have to be very aware of what's going on, and the last thing we need to do is not vote. Everyone needs to vote.
I think so too. I mean, and I say that full disclosure as one of the founders of Hip Hop Votes at Hot 97. Even if, and some of the elected officials, Tony, have told me that even if you don't vote for the president because you just don't want to be, make that choice, that you should still go to the polls and vote in the local elections because they'll have more of an impact on our lives. Is that true or false?
That's totally true. The primaries in our city alone are the most impactful elections that we could be a part of, particularly that of those who vote for congressmen, state senators, state assembly, and city council reps, all the way down to the civil court judges. These are the people that we have a direct in-your-face kind of contact with, and when that trickle-down comes from government, it goes down in that matter. It comes to the state allocates to the city. We need that money. But let's be very clear about something. This particular election is electrifying, and I'll tell you why. Not only because a woman is running, but it's losing a lot of its flavor because this reality TV concept that media has a fixation on Donald Trump and his stupidity. He's a misogynistic, egotistical, arrogant, disrespectful racist. And unfortunately, I don't understand why folks are even gravitating to this guy. I'd never really watch, stupid show, Apprentice.
Isn't it our Facebook culture? Isn't it our celebrity culture?
Exactly.
Isn't it our reality show culture that we're in? People don't care about issues. I know him.
It's the circus. And people are obsessed with the get rich quick thing and, I want to be able to say what I want to say and so on and so forth. So in that aspect, he's like picking up a lot of steam because that's how people feel in the back of their head. Is it right? No, of course not.
We've seen some of the hip hop, like Pusha T did the voter registration with Hillary, some of the other hip hop artists, but has anybody really reached out to the hip hop community, Reggie?
I'm not aware,
like in a real way.
With regard to this cycle of elections, I'm not fully aware. I mean, I know Killer Mike was a huge proponent for Bernie Sanders. And Bernie had, I think, out of all of the candidates during this cycle, Bernie really had the most support from the hip hop community because he really presented,
I think so too,
an alternative to politics as usual.
And that's what people were going.
And after he got knocked off,
then people lost interest. Those same people like Killer Mike, I figured, well, maybe he's going to come and jump on the Hillary train because Bernie Sanders, Democrat. But it's quiet, like crickets.
But what about, is it possible, is there a day ahead in the future, because I don't think it's happening this time around the election, where hip-hop can be seen as, where the culture or the bulk of the culture can be seen as a voting bloc, a consciousness, as you were talking about?
I think we've seen that I think we've seen that with the Obama campaign. Like Obama was a child of the hip-hop community. Obama was involved in the early days of the Source magazine, if you know his history. So he definitely was that hip-hop candidate, and we've seen the result twice.
Well, I think he actively, he would express his love for hip hop and who he was listening to.
I got Jay-Z on a playlist, and people were like, "Wow, that's so amazing!" A guy that's going to be in the White House.
But then he just had South by South lawn at the White House.
Right.
You will never see that happen again.
there's a very big perception in the community, especially in communities of color and the African, the black community in particular.
Okay, tell me about it.
That no, but I'm just saying as a reporter and as a talk show, as somebody who's out there on the streets, that there are two systems of justice. That if you commit a crime as a civilian, you're going to jail. You're getting arrested and you're going to do time. If you commit a crime, if you do something that is wrong when you're wearing the uniform and when you're wearing the badge, you don't end up suffering any consequences.
Even when you're not wearing a uniform.
Right.
Yeah, you still.
Although we've seen in Brooklyn, we saw the case with the
East New
where the man was killed, in Brooklyn by the off-duty police officer, not Akai Gurley, the one
You talking
just
about the
recently.
guy that went to the guy's window when he was parked at a light and he just popped up on him? Yeah.
He was indicted, but what do you think about this feeling that there's two systems of justice, Reggie?
There are two systems of justice. United States citizens are held at a higher level of accountability than the public servants that are the police officers.
I mean,
there's no accountability.
And I agree. Even something as small as driving with a cell phone, I've gotten a cell phone ticket. Meanwhile, I'll see officers in the car in uniform. They're driving. They're on the cell phone, texting, doing the same thing. So not only something as large as, killing someone, but it trickles down to even something as small as that.
The broken window and broken windows and
those things build up over those frustrations build up over time. Those sense. Tony, what about that in terms of where we are with NYPD, because they have dropped stop and frisk has gone way down.
Right, well, it never stopped. Just keep in mind, it still exists.
And what they say to me is
it's just not abused. It's not as abused as it was.
It's a standard police tactic. You got to stop somebody and ask them a question.
Yeah, because you can't give anybody the impression they can walk around here with a gun and no one's going to say or do anything about it. But when it's all said and done, the problem we have is there's so much lack of trust on both sides, and there's a issue with regards to being able to communicate that message. Now, I do give the police department the credit with their NCO program, that outreach program, neighborhood community officers, right. And with that being the case, we want to give that a fair chance. I do see the outreach. I was invited as a community leader to sit down and have lunch with the commissioner, and that this same commissioner who's in was the same person who invited me to sit down when he became the chief of department. So there is some level of outreach. The question of the matter is, to what degree? And let's give it a chance to see what happens, because if there is failure, then it goes back to the legislators to get their behinds in gear and then act on this and what have you to produce legislation that's going to assist us as African Americans in this community, in this city.
And then in terms of making voting cool, what about if we replaced the countless number of stripper poles, no disrespect to the exotic dancers, but in videos and music videos, and we had people like going to vote. We had guys sitting
How about
around
you being
smoking
able
their...
to vote in a strip club? Yo!
And get a free lap dance.
Voter strip.
Magic City, let's vote.
We did it at the Funkmaster Flex car show. We've done voter registration at Summer Jam. We've done it from the shout out to Denisha Benjamin.
You guys do a good
She had
job.
it with the mobile, put it in the mobile, the mobile street
By the
teams.
sushi buffet.
The street teams registered, and now we're online. I don't know about the strip club thing though.
Yo, it would be effective though.
It would
I'm
work.
pretty sure we find some of our politicians.
What
there.
about
It
a
would
bunch
really
of
work.
artists doing a big concert and saying the way to get in is to vote?
You have to register.
To register to
There
vote.
it is. On that note, we got to. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank our guests for this episode of Street Soldiers on Hip Hop and Politics. Reggie Osei, host of the Combat Jack Show.
Internets.
Internets. I know. I always think hairnets when you say internets, but internet, there's multiple internets.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I
ma'am.
recognize that. Tamika Hall Fry, aka Lady Blogger, a writer and managing editor for Cool Media, and citywide community advocate. He's for the people and for the public. The one and only Tony Herbert from Brooklyn. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers. Have a great week. Have a great day. Have a great life. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace.